Good morning and welcome to the NBA Daily. Coming up, Victor Wembanyama is out for the year. We're going to talk about that a little bit. We got Sam Amick coming in to give us the behind the scenes on that. The Knicks win in overtime, and the Bucks, they got Giannis back, and let's see how that Kyle Kuzma fit's working out. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Zena.
Good morning, Dave.
A little bit of bad news to start the day. As you guys probably know, if you're listening, Victor Wembanyama has been diagnosed with a deep vein thrombosis in his right shoulder. He's going to be out for the season. This is awful news for people like us, Zena, that watch and love basketball every single night. The good news is he's going to be back at the start of next season. The Spurs expect him to be completely healthy. This is just a bump in the road. So that's the great news. But in the short term, Zena, we have to adjust to life without Victor Wembanyama for the rest of the season.
Yeah, this sucks. Like for basketball fans, not only for the San Antonio Spurs, but universally, like this guy was the face of the league to be, right? When you think about what Victor Wembanyama, you talk about levitational player, a guy that's crafty, that's wily, that does these methodical moves on the court and blows your mind because he's 7'4". It's like you're not supposed to be able to do that in this lanky body that you've got. And he entertains us all with everything that he does out on the floor. And it's really unfortunate that now that has come to an end. But you're right in that it's good news that this was caught, because deep vein thrombosis is an incredibly scary thing that, if not caught, could have fatal circumstances. So it is really great that they were able to catch that, notice that his breath was a little bit short, and said, okay, let's do some tests and figure this out for Wemby.
Yeah. Again, stick around, guys. After the break, Sam Amick, he wrote a whole piece on it, and he joins the show and breaks down the entire timeline, including like this has been going on for a few weeks now with Wemby. So definitely stick around for that. Zena, it feels weird because we did have a basketball game Wednesday night, but we're now officially back from the All-Star break. Although there's an argument to be made that in some of these games, the guys are still on vacation.
They're a little sluggish.
Yeah.
They're a little,
The Knicks and Bulls had a game in which I don't know if we could say they really played defense. It was an entertaining game, but not a great one. The Knicks did do the thing that they do when they pulled out a tough win. Jalen Brunson hits a clutch shot that sets up an opportunity for the Bulls to get a game-winning shot. And Zena, Mikal Bridges has a clutch block essentially at the buzzer to force overtime. Is this the best block this season?
Because of the circumstances and what should set it up? Absolutely. Because it's one thing to have a block just because it's just nasty and disrespectful, but it's another thing because it actually set them up to be able to go on and win the game. So yeah, shout out to Mikal Bridges for the athletic play. Yeah.
And again, Jalen Brunson, just what he does end of games, the ability to always get a shot, that continued over into overtime where the defense just, in my opinion, they sell out for Jalen Brunson and he winds up creating these easy looks. He hit Karl Anthony Towns for a really nice little pocket pass that I thought caught Towns off guard. Towns hits a little floater and essentially the game was over after that. But Karl Anthony Towns puts up 32 points and 18 rebounds.
Thank you, Dave. I was wondering if you were going to only give some love to the guard play.
Don't worry.
Karl Anthony Towns was insane.
That's right. You're big on big. So look, I mean, what he's been doing rebounding, I think what he's been doing offensively, he's a lock for all NBA, but this rebounding is pretty intense. And when we think about the Knicks, we know that there's such, rebounding is so important for them. It has been historically. Right. What about what he's doing on the glass?
Yeah, I mean, 18 rebounds tonight. And what's the crazy part is he's getting the rebounds and he's leading the breaks. Yeah. And that's what makes the Knicks so scary, is that you've got your stretch big being able to get the glass and not stop the pace of the Knicks to get up the court. Karl Anthony Towns all year long, since he's joined the Knicks, has been exactly what they needed out of an Isaiah Hartenstein. Same thing in terms of being able to be that pivot in the offense that Isaiah was pretty well. And offensive rebounding as well and defensive rebounding. But now it's also being able to shoot threes consistently and keep the pace of the Knicks up. And that's what he did all night long. He was also finishing through some serious contact, taking the ball off the dribble on the wing. I love the way that his game has just blossomed in New York, especially alongside Jalen Brunson. But yeah, he was doing everything to keep the Knicks into the game. It's weird that he didn't score in the fourth quarter. And then it was Jalen Brunson that kind of woke him back up in overtime to get the win.
Honestly, that happens with the Knicks sometimes.
Yeah,
I feel like
that's true.
You'll see Cat first 3 quarters, he'll have 27, 28, and then it's Brunson time down the stretch. And it's working. It's a little bit of like thunder and lightning situation for them. I don't know. The Knicks are fun and they can score. Look, we got to talk about the Bucks. Giannis is back. He was on a minutes limit. And so the Clippers really made this quite a hard game, I think, for the Bucks. I thought the Clippers were going to win it once Giannis kind of ran out of minutes, but then the Bucks pulled it out there at the end. But I think the biggest story is Kyle Kuzma taking over all of these minutes that are now available because Bobby Portis got suspended for 25 games for taking a banned substance, Zena. So they better hope Kuzma continues to fit in as well as he did last night, where he went 3 of 7 from 3 for 13 points.
Bruh, that Bobby Portis situation is wild. You take a pill from your friend who mistakenly told you it was one version of a medication that's actually allowed, and you take a banned substance. Like, we all got that notification being like, what has Bobby Portis been up to? Like, what's happening in the locker room? And it turns out to be a mistaken pill. Fellas out there in the league, anyone, any athlete, don't take pills from your friends.
Well, Zena, hang on.
What are we doing?
Zena, you were a Division I athlete.
And I would never.
List. There was a list,
right?
Correct?
Right.
I mean, you knew all the list of things. These were the approved things I can take. And it is a situation where you have tramadol and toradol. And
it's close, but no.
I get it. Bobby Portis, not a pharmacist. But, let's not take pills from your just some guy. I don't know. I mean, I feel bad because it does seem like it's a little bit of a human error situation.
Yeah.
And clearly, like, Bobby Portis has not come across to me as the type of guy that's trying to cheat or do anything like that. So
that's why we were all so shocked.
Yeah.
And it sucks because Bobby Portis was putting up significant numbers for the Bucks, especially in Giannis's absence. He was on the boards. He was putting up some serious shots. I mean, there was 2 shots that he took, I think, in his last 5 games. He had 20 shots a game coming off like the bench. Like, this is a significant loss for the Bucks. And so that's why Kyle Kuzma sliding into this role of being the younger legs, pushing the ball in transition, being able to attack the basket. That is going to be what Kuzma's role is, perfectly timed for Bobby Portis to be absent.
Yeah, he had a great first quarter, and it did not go great for Kuzma the rest of the game. So, I mean, look, the looks that he's going to get in Milwaukee are guaranteed to be better than the ones he had with the Wizards. So I think he should be pretty close to what he did tonight. 3 of 7 from 3. As long as he gets those shots up, I think it's going to look pretty good. The Bucks should be better when Giannis is back to full strength. And before we go to break, we do have to mention, because the playoff race is super hot right now, Memphis lost to the Pacers yesterday, Zena, and the Nuggets pick up a win over the Hornets. So that means we have a new 2 seed in the West. And I think that, look, I maybe was early in saying that the Nuggets were back. They're now officially back. This team is 20-8 since Christmas. That's the second best record in the NBA in that time. We've been talking about Jamal Murray looking good. We've been talking about Jokic getting triple doubles in 3 quarters. The Nuggets are back.
You know why you were early? Because you peeped that Russell Westbrook Jokic connection. Now, I'm not gonna lie, Russell Westbrook wasn't great last night, but that was kind of the spark that got things going for the Nuggets. And of course, Jamal Murray getting into the shape of and getting into the bag that we know he has. Yeah. He has been cooking from the free throw line, just being able to take his defender. And also the bench has stepped up. I've been screaming Julian Strawther's name since the top of this season. I knew that once his 3-ball got into shape, that the Nuggets would be in a better position. And right now, Michael Malone has things rolling with the rotations that he's putting out there. They look good. They look real good.
They do look good. DeAndre Jordan, by the way, got another dunk. This guy is going to dunk till he's 50.
Correct.
Yeah,
Why not?
and he will be
It's
on
fine.
a basketball team until then. Guys, stick around after the break. Sam Amick goes inside on what's going on with the Spurs and Victor Wembanyama, and even lets us know that the Spurs may be searching for a new coach this summer. Obviously, the biggest news of the day, Spurs center and generational big man Victor Wembanyama has been diagnosed with a blood clot in his shoulder. He's going to miss the rest of the season. So we had to bring Sam Amick back in here because he's got all the inside info on that. Sam, where did this come from? What happened?
Thank you for having me, guys. The podcast that none of us wish we were doing.
Yeah.
Victor was on the ascent, doing incredible things. I decided to rock the Paris Olympics hat today in honor of the young man who we all want to be healthy and happy going forward. So my understanding is, to your question, Dave, in terms of how it happened, I don't know the exact timeline, but he has been feeling low energy for quite some time now. And it sounds like it might be even a matter of weeks before the All-Star break. Complaints about low energy, confusion about low energy, gets to All-Star weekend, obviously took part, had his controversial strategy with Chris Paul in the skills competition on Saturday night, and then ends up playing in the two different, versions of the All-Star game on Sunday, 13 combined minutes, still feeling behind the scenes low energy. Then decides, all right, and he even said to reporters, I'm going to spend a couple days not thinking about basketball. And his hope at that time was to go on a 2-day vacation of sorts and to finally get his energy back. But when he got to the end of that little stretch of time and still wasn't feeling like himself, then the alarm bells were going off even more than before. They began the testing process and thankfully found something that, if not detected, could have certainly been a lot worse. I would never pretend to be a doctor on this show or any other, but it's not a real complicated problem. You're talking about a blood clot that, if it were to continue growing or being in his system, it could break free. And the life-threatening part potentially is that it can go within his system down to his lungs. And at that point, it could be an embolism, and that would be the absolute worst case scenario. So glad they found it. The Spurs are signaling optimism as it relates to him being ready at the start of next year. And they do feel like they, avoided something that could have been a lot more serious.
You referenced your hat, Sam. The number one thing that comes to mind, especially with Wemby, is not even All-Star. It's this documentary that's dropped on Netflix. I know you had also taken the time to watch it. Like, what were your thoughts of how you watched that documentary leading into this story breaking?
Yeah, it was kind of wild in terms of just our jobs and how, you're, to a certain extent, you're a prisoner of kind of where your head is at when certain news happens. And so
Right.
I'm literally sitting on my couch, had just finished the 6th and final episode of Court of Gold, the Netflix doc that chronicled not just Team USA, but all the teams. And I mean, probably 4 or 5 minutes after the end of the documentary, which I absolutely loved, and which I need to highlight, 6 episodes finishes with Victor Wembanyama as the focal point, as the dramatic mic drop, where Team USA wins gold. They have footage of Victor behind the scenes with tears welling in his eyes, getting, spoken to by Boris Diaw, the French team GM. Everybody's trying to lift Vic up because he's devastated that they lost to the Americans in the gold medal game. And it was such great insight to the competitor that he is, to the care factor that he has. And then they cut to the scene where Vic is talking to the media after the gold medal game loss. And he says, I'm learning and I'm afraid for everybody else. And they said, well, who are you talking about? The NBA or the rest of the world? And he said, everybody, and so it was like this dramatic, like, damn, like this guy is coming next. So man, like from a mental standpoint for me to be watching that and just going, ooh-wee, that was some good storytelling. That was a fantastic doc. And then to see this awful news where, you're looking at a big time setback for a guy that is obviously on the ascent is unfortunate, to say the least.
Yeah. I mean, and you mentioned, again, just scary news. I think the first thing that popped in my head when I heard deep vein thrombosis, blood clot, was Chris Bosh, who, had to retire because of it. But it seems like this one is going to be more like what Brandon Ingram dealt with in his shoulder. the timeline of I guess rehab and return seems like he's going to be ready for next year. What does this mean for the Spurs, like in the short term?
I mean, truthfully, I don't want to downplay any of it, but now that we know, and let's really hope that
he's safe, healthy,
is good. I can make an argument that it's a setback, honestly, for the fans and us folks who wanted to see him finish his year, who, expected to see him win his first Defensive Player of the Year award, which he's now no longer going to be eligible for. The Spurs had fallen a bit in the standings. I am very interested, whether it's, next few weeks or next few months, whenever Victor speaks, to hear his perspective on the degree to which his energy issues impacted his play, because the Spurs had fallen off, and some of the Spurs fans who are watching every single game have already jumped in my timeline and said, we could see this for a while. This was like a conversation topic among Spurs fans. Like, what is going on with Vic? He looks more winded than normal. So the short term though is like, if they were headed toward, not being in the playoffs anyway, their future is just as bright when you talk about bringing Wemby back, bringing De'Aaron Fox back. Obviously, he pushed his way there largely because of the chance with Wemby. Stephon Castle, Devin Vassell, all these guys. And by the way, 2 first-round draft picks in this June draft. They've got Atlanta's pick and they have their own. So, they're going to come back even stronger. I am very curious, as a quick aside, and this is maybe worth a whole pod down the road, who's going to be coaching the Spurs next year. I think their questions remain about Greg Popovich's health, his future. Mitch Johnson has done a nice job as interim, but a lot of rumors flying around about maybe a change happening there. So lots to be figured out. And I do still think a bright future for Wemby and the Spurs.
This is going to sound odd, but I had noticed that the Pacers had this huge drop off after the Paris game. And I was trying to tie it to travel, but I had also looked at Wemby's numbers that same stretch and had noticed his numbers drop too. And I had chalked it up to these guys shouldn't necessarily be traveling to Paris in the middle of a season and be expected to not have time off. And maybe this is something they look into down the line as far as changing that. But when you have guys this height and they're traveling so much, I mean, Zena, you kind of laid it out for me in our pre-show because you had spoken to someone about this. This is sort of one of the dangers that comes along with having so much travel. Is that something, Sam, that maybe the Spurs are going to look into addressing? I don't even know, how you can address it for one player, whether he's the shorter trips or by bus or, limo. I don't know how they do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair question, Dave. I just don't know. First and foremost, they got to get clarity on the medical stuff. Like when, can they pinpoint when the clot began forming, why it was forming? Without that clarity, it's going to be tough to attach it to certain trips. But, everything you're highlighting is fair. I mean, again, kind of online doctor degree here, but reading about deep vein thrombosis, it can certainly be exacerbated by travel and by airplane rides. And so, we'll find out, I guess, if those are dots that are fair to connect. And again, Victor's perspective is going to be really interesting here because we all know our systems better than anybody. I just want to learn more about when did he start not feeling like himself? And we'll see how he sees it at some point.
I'm curious where obviously the focus is on Victor and making sure that he's going to be okay. And, of course, the Spurs are kind of rallying around him and rallying around his health in general. But in terms of the implications on the rest of the organization and maybe even other players around the league looking at what's going on, like what are some of the things that you're anticipating that you might see as a result of what's going on with Wemby, a superstar that takes care of his body, elite care of his body, ending up in a situation like this?
I mean, I don't know, Zena, what the takeaway would be for me if I was one of those guys, because on the one hand, each situation we've seen like this, and Dave, you highlighted Chris Bosh and, Asar Thompson, Christian Coloco, there's some other ones, those all kind of independently felt like outliers. I mean, I guess that's the nature of a blood clot, right? Is that it's very, very difficult to figure out the whys and the hows and the whens of something like that. So if I was a player, I think my focus would probably just be on the idea that for one, this particular young superstar has captured the attention not only of media and fans, but of his peers. You know, in my column that is out on The Athletic now, I talk about how, you know, that whole idea of who's going to take the torch next has been something where Vic feels like the only guy who really wants to grab it. You know, Anthony Edwards comes out this week and tells the world that he doesn't want to be that guy, and even said that's what we got Wemby for. That's what they got Wemby for. You know, some other guys have tried and fallen a little bit short, at least to this point. You know, you got Ja Morant, and the fact that injuries and his PR fall off has been pretty steep. And he kind of fell out of the running for that unofficial job. You got Zion Williamson with his injuries and some of his PR stuff. Luka Doncic, you know, like good candidate, but an imperfect candidate for that role. SGA is probably the one guy that right now is his star is as bright as anybody's. But Wemby adds, I shouldn't be saying past tense, adds that international element, the combination of charisma, confidence, and all, you know, culturally as well, at a time when the league is trying to grow, you know, well beyond the American borders. And they have been for decades, but this is a new chapter. You know, they have investments and interest in trying to start a new league in Europe. That lines up very well with having Wemby as the face of your franchise and of your league. All of those things made him so unique, not just on the court, but off. And I think even his peers, the other players out there, are probably just looking at that and wondering, you know, what it means for him going forward.
Yeah. Again, we hope that he's healthy and he's back next season. It's a bummer for him. It's a bummer for us. Every single night he does something amazing. So, you know, get well soon, Wemby. Thank you, Sam Amick, the guy we keep too busy on the podcast because the league keeps him too busy. That's going to do it for today's show, folks. Thanks to Sam Amick for stopping in and giving us all that inside info. For Zena, Keita, I'm Dave DuFour, and this has been the NBA Daily. Thanks for waking up with us.